If you're interested by sales, you're going to enjoy this conversation with Ron Hubsher. He's absolutely phenomenal, and his experience is tremendous, as you will hear in the next 40 minutes. Enjoy the conversation with Ron. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today we're going to talk about sales. And I'm sure that is interesting everyone here, how you become a better closer, a better negotiator. And to do that, we're going to talk with none other than the person who actually found the field of business-to-business negotiation, wrote books about it, as a guest lecturer at Harvard University, had the documented close of $600 million deal, and so on and so forth. Absolutely amazing career. None other than the founder and president of the Sales Optimization Group, Ron Hubsher. Ron, thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, Eric, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm beyond grateful. And to be on with a great business leader and a great thought leader, I feel honored. So thank you, Eric.
Well, you don't look 150 years old, which why I was expecting with everything you've done in your life. But tell us a little bit, how did it start? When did you start selling and being interested in the science and the process of selling?
Well, my father had his own business. And I think you always learn, especially for a lot of young boys, they emulate, whether knowingly or unknowingly, emulate their father. And my father was always an entrepreneur, and he had a magazine with my Uncle Bill. They were publishers, and they always were always learning how to sell better and sell more. And my father actually took Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which, by the way, I think is a must-read book for anybody of any age.
Agree.
So it was actually very interesting. So I read that book a little later on in life, and I said, oh my God, this book is my father. So I was internally raised with those principles. And I'm just an engineer who's a sales guy. That if you take someone who's just like an engineer, like how do you take things apart? How do you manufacture them? So how would you manufacture a sale? Like what are the elements? What are the steps you need to do? So you consistently, have a good outcome on the other end. So I'm just a sales guy who's an engineer, and I just started reading books on sales probably when I was 16 or 17. And I always had little businesses. With my best friend, Robbie, we would mow people's yards, and we also do snowblower. So we bought a snowblower, and when it would snow, we'd run out and we try and do all the neighbors' yards. And, unfortunately, a snowblower, one of the things we learned is you have to have good equipment because the thing would break down on us all the time. Lesson learned. But we always had small businesses, and I always had small businesses going on through my life. Also, then later in college, I had a programming business, and just learning from my dad, just trying to be an entrepreneur. And the first thing to be an entrepreneur is you need clients. So how do you acquire clients? So that's how I sort of got into the what I call the science and business of sales.
You make it so simple. One thing you just said was like, wow, I'm just an engineer who likes sales. And I mean, I have a lot of engineers in my family. It's not a natural consequence of being an engineer.
Well, you know what? I always think it's really interesting. I always say, if you show me someone who's analytical, who has good social skills, and, I can't coach social skills, that's been developed over times. But if you show me someone who's analytical with good social skills, I'll show you the next best salesperson. Because all it is just following a process. And it's really interesting. What I find for most business-to-business sales, there's three things you need to do really well. The first is you need some good listening skills and questioning skills, right? So you can understand your customer. Listen more than you talk, understand the situation. If it's a complex sale, and when I call it complex, usually, a couple of decision makers, not just selling one person one time, then you need some kind of opportunity plan. So, how do we differentiate ourselves from competitors? What are the things that how can we influence the buying decision? For all the decision makers, what's their business win with us going with us? And what's their personal win? I always think that's really important. So, how does Eric win on a personal point of view from choosing us and not our competitors? Does it give him more time to spend writing his book, or spending time with his kids, or coaching his daughter's softball game, or whatever those things might be? So I always think it's really necessary to have a nice opportunity plan. And then if you have a good negotiation plan, so given that you've done a superlative sales effort, how do we beat up competitors, command a price premium, and create a great long-term customer relationship? If you have those three things in place, you'll do pretty well, pretty consistently. And they're just simple tools that we develop. And I always think simplicity trumps complexity. So
Yeah.
we give our clients just simple tools. Here's a good discovery questions that you want to know the answers to. Here's a good opportunity plan. So you can, all one pager, so you can quickly map the opportunity and say, oh, we haven't contacted that buyer. Or I don't know how Eric wins when we win. I know what his stated goal is, but what's his personal goal, right? By doing this, is he going to have more time to spend with his family? Can help accelerate his business? What are those things that can help him on a personal point of view? And then when he goes to negotiate and close, what's our 7-step? We have a very simple 7-step process that anyone can implement. So I'm all a big fan of simplicity and process, and you can really get remarkable results. And like just sort of our clients. So we work with some of the best sales organizations in the world, companies like ADP, DocuSign. People, the best of the best, and we can get immediate measurable results by showing a simple, easy, repeatable process.
That's phenomenal. In everything you said, I imagine somebody sitting into your training and listening to what you're saying, and you got the tools. How do we then ensure that they're actually using it, they are consistent, and there's an accountability in that?
Yeah, and Eric, that's the 100% spot on. So I'm a big fan. It's a little bit old school. So everything we do is a one-page, and I'll show you, is a one-page laminate. Is there any way to enforce it? It's generally hard to actually enforce, right? But I always just like things keep it simple. My concept is if things are simple that yield results, people are more likely to use them. So once you say, hey, I use your negotiation methodology, and I used law number 1, asking them, for the buyer's number 1 choice. And they said yes and why. It removed all the tension from the negotiation process. And I was able to close them at full price. So you get a self-healing process. Hey, this was simple. It wasn't hard. Took a little courage maybe to ask the question. But once I did it, I closed the deal at full asking price. And then they're all turned on. They're all excited. So in every sales culture, you'd like someone to do everything the same way, 1,000% of the time. In reality, they're not going to do it. But if you keep it simple and it yields results, you have the highest probability of success.
Amazing. Is it easier today to prepare a sales with all the information you can collect on a prospect? Or is it something that, it's there, but how do you use that?
So, I always think it's easier and harder. It's easier if you do things correctly. It's hard if you do things incorrectly.
Explain that to me.
Yeah. So you have the opportunity to really connect with people by just doing a little bit of research. In certain fields, people are not on LinkedIn or don't have a lot of publicly available information. If you're selling technology, everyone's going to be on LinkedIn. You're going to know the college they went to. You can find a lot of things about their background, right? I just got off a call with someone who's like me, an engineer and an MBA. So we had, he's in Germany. I'm like, oh, like you. I go, I'm just a scientist. I'm just an engineering guy just trying to figure out sales. He goes, yeah, that's exactly it. Right. So you all have that automatic connection. Things are going to be, business by nature is more choppy and less predictable. Like your pipeline, you can see it with some predictability and some regularity. Now people change out more quickly. So there's a little stuff will pop up more quickly and go away more quickly, which you don't have control over. But what you do have control over is, hey, through Zoom, I can pop into a meeting for someone for 15 minutes, right? And though I'm not feet to feet, I'm still face to face. And by the way, I can get a lot of information from that Zoom call that I couldn't get in a room full of 8 people. So like, as I look back, if I didn't do my research on you, Eric, I could already say, hey, Eric, before it's too late, tell me about that. And, I don't have to be a genius to recognize, that that's your book, right? Hopefully I would have done that research in advance.
Right.
Tell me about that, right? You're oftentimes into their house. There could be a child in the background. There could be a dog in the background. They could have their favorite sports team, right? Which can give you insight into them, right? That you couldn't.
You're trying to always find the commonalities first.
I always look for commonalities, right? I always look for like, hey, you're a Knicks fan, I'm a Knicks fan. Or you love basketball, I love basketball. You love coaching your daughter's basketball team. That's awesome. I coach track. It's fun to see the kids grow, right? And you connect at a much deeper personal level because everyone can ask the same, even if everyone had the same discovery questions, everyone's going to get the same business. Hey, we need to grow sales, or hey, we need to reduce costs, or hey, we need to increase quality control. Every good salesperson is going to get that, right? It's not going to differentiate you. What's going to differentiate you is how is this going to affect them on a personal basis, right? How's it going to be like, wow, this is going to remove a headache, or this is going to give me more time to do what I really want to do. So I always think, and we always talk about that people don't buy price, by risk. And if in your sales process you can show you're the least risky solution, then you've earned the right to command a price premium. So I want to know what kind of risks, Eric is facing. If you're buying our services, what's Eric's risk profile? He's worried that it's not going to work, or he's worried it's going to take too much time away from his core business, or whatever it might be. That's what a really good salesperson is, understand what's their business risk, which is easy to get in a room full of 8 people, but what's their personal risk, right? In a corporate environment, hey, if I've worked 15 years to get to this position, if this thing blows up, this is a career limiting move, right? Okay, here's how we help people just exactly like you. By the way, call my friend Owen. Owen was sitting there with the same thing. I wouldn't call Owen at this large company. He was sitting there with the same example, and he had the same concern. And here's how he's absolved. We eliminated that concern for him. So I'm always about minimizing risk.
You were saying also that with all the information we can find on someone, it's easier, but you say also it can be more difficult. Can you explain that as well?
Yeah. So, and it was funny. I was just on a call before. Someone's putting in we're helping them put a digital sales process in place this is a large business to business sale. So, tens of $1 million on each deal. So he was saying, the old school guys would say, you got to go out to the client site. You got to, have lunch, have dinner, have all these things. And he said he closed a really big deal, it was in excess of, $100 million. And it was funny. He said, I never met them face to face. And I'm like, no, you met them face to face on Zoom or Teams. You did meet them face to face. You are in feet to feet. And there's a difference between, you can have more face to face encounters. They may not be feet to feet, but you can have more intimate face to face encounters, and they can be way more productive if you choose to let them. Otherwise, some people say, and the other thing is they're going to be smaller, like a half hour is a lot for people these days. So you have to really think about how you're going to use that to your advantage. If you have like 8 people on your side, 8 people on their side, and you got a half hour, by the time you get through introductions, you're done, right? So you have to really think about how you're going to do this. So it can be if you don't want to change, if you're going to have the eight people meeting 8 people, and then we're going to go a half hour corporate production, corporate overview, you're dead. But how can I make this really effective? How can I have more one-on-one meetings?
Yes.
Hey, Eric, you mentioned something really important in a meeting that I heard. We had that big introduction meeting, and you said something really important. And I wanted to drill into that to make sure we understand that need and we can address it perfectly for you. So if you don't change and use it to your advantage, it can be a huge disadvantage. Just sort of like all the information. If you're not taking advantage of that information and finding the right information, that's great. If you're taking advantage of that information, like looking about what their background is. And for an example, if you're speaking to an American male, things they often care about are they'll have a big affinity for their college or school, right?
Yep.
Some sports teams, if you can gather that. So if I'm calling someone, and this is actually true, if I'm calling someone in New England, I know they're Boston, a New England Patriot fan, I never call a day after a loss because I know they're going to be in a bad mood. If after a win, I'll say, hey, man, this is back in the day, Tom Brady, did you see that? Mac Jones played great. Tom Brady did this. And they're like, oh, yeah. And like, they're in a much better mood on a business and personal level.
That's brilliant. And I forgot about that. But you're so right. I remember back in Belgium, I had a Flemish teacher in high school. And she was a big fan of Bruges, the soccer team.
Yeah.
And if Bruges would win on Sunday, you can be sure there was no test on Monday. And if they lost, then everybody was studying.
Everybody was taking a test. And, just something as simple as that, and knowing that, that really helps. So you can either commiserate, and it's really true. If someone's a diehard fan, do not call the day after a loss. I mean, they'll just, and I was that way as a kid growing up. If the Knicks lost, I couldn't have a good day at school. I mean, that was just the way I was wired. And then the same is true of all, we do work worldwide. So for our European customers, I typically will know their favorite football, European football, or what we call soccer team, and just ask them. And I actually like the sport, so I'm not lying, but, I was like, oh, they did a great game against this, or they're standing at the top of the table in the Premier League. Or, oh man, I had a friend who's a big Aston Villa. I don't know if they've been relegated, but they're close to relegation. I'm like, oh man, we got to win this game, man. Otherwise, we're in the relegation zone. They appreciate you understanding that.
I like always the we need to do that when actually they're sitting in their living room watching TV, but it's we need to do that.
We need to. So I never made it to the Knicks. The closest I'd ever get to a Knicks game is buying a ticket. It's still a we effort. my cheering definitely. My cheering, or somehow, is wrapped up in that feeling.
And you know what it takes to be a an athlete. You were 5 times U.S. Master pole vaulter.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny, Eric. That's my passion in life. Like I was always a track and field guy. I love to pole vault. I did in high school and college, and now I do it as a master's level. And this is just sort of a great example. Thank you for bringing that up. On my LinkedIn profile, if you go to the bottom under my education, you'll see that I was track and field. I have a little picture of me jumping. And this sort of shows you the level of sales. And I'm a guy who will pick up my phone, right? You call me, I'm an old school guy. I will pick up my phone, even though I know it's potential spam. I will actually pick up my phone. No one, like this is the level of professional sales. No one looks on my LinkedIn profile, scrolls to the bottom and says, oh, Ron, track and field. If you say that, that's like the magic word, ding, ding, ding. I will spend infinite amount of time with you. You've done your research. If you don't need my product, out of respect, I'll give you at least a half hour because you've done your research. And no one ever, Eric, like no one goes to the bottom of my LinkedIn profile and just says, oh, Ron, I see you jumped in high school in college. Yeah, how'd you know, man? My favorite, like that goes straight to my heartstrings. Like that's the thing I care most about in life, on a deeply personal basis. So that's a great way of sort of discussing that.
Awesome. Now, a lot of things obviously is happening on Zoom. How do you train people to negotiate on Zoom? Because Zoom is wonderful, or Teams or whatever you're using when it comes for training or conversation. I found that when it comes to pure negotiation, you don't really see the same way the nonverbal hints that somebody can give you, and I don't know. It sounds to me it's easier to negotiate when you are physically in the same room than over the computer.
Yeah. So I always think there's a hierarchy, and I'll go. And first of all, negotiation is a big word. It's like saying, hey, I'm good at math. Well, what does that really mean? Are you good at addition, subtraction, multiplication, calculus, differential equations? They're all different classes of mathematics. And the same is true as negotiation. One type of negotiation is conflict resolution. So how do two parties at war come to peace? Or how does a labor union negotiate with a corporation? Or how do you handle a hostage negotiation? And the key thing there is both parties have to deal with each other. And if you don't come to an agreement, bad stuff's going to happen. So in the case of a labor union, they can go out on strike, or the company can shut down the factory. In the case of a war or ongoing hostilities, bad stuff's going to happen. And that's a very different negotiation than a business-to-business sales negotiation, where you want to win the deal, command a price premium, and great long-term relationships. And I would argue that, did that make sense, by the way, Eric?
Yeah, totally.
And I would argue, actually, hostage negotiation is technically an easier negotiation than a business-to-business sales negotiation. Because in a hostage negotiation, they have to deal with you, right? Otherwise, you're not coming out alive, right? So they have to deal with you. Status quo is not an option. And there are 3 competitors giving them different offers. Okay, so it's technically, the consequences are more dire, but the negotiation,
if you lose the sales, you're not dying.
Yeah, the mechanics are much more difficult in the business-to-business sales negotiation. The outcome's a little different, but the mechanics are more difficult because status quo, yeah, I don't have to buy your product. Or, hey, there are 3 people who look exactly like you selling the same thing. They're all good. And, one of them is going to be an ankle biter, giving a low price. And then there are others, what I would call spot transactional negotiators. How do I beat a street vendor out of $15, right? There's no sales process up front, and there's no legacy on the back end. It's just a one-time transaction. And the way we got into this business is one of our clients said, hey, Ron, we really don't negotiate well. Go find us a good negotiation vendor. And if someone said, hey, find me a good sales training vendor for question-based selling skills or opportunity management, there's tons of them, right? You can find them, find one that looks best for your business and, customize it, you'll be pretty good. And we'd found that no one had studied business-to-business sales negotiations. People were sort of talking about hostage negotiation, diplomatic negotiation, quoting diplomats, quoting labor unions, which is conflict resolution. And a lot of getting to yes is about conflict resolution, right? Mm-hmm. How do we get to yes? There's some applicability, but if you use the wrong negotiation methodology, you'll often do more harm than good. And other people are sort of spot transactional, do the takeaway, do the walk away, do this, do that, which are okay, but it's not a really complex business-to-business sales negotiation paradigm. So we went out and we just interviewed the best business-to-business salespeople we knew. And we asked them how they went out and negotiate and close. And from that, we put together a really simple, repeatable 7-step process. Did that make sense, Eric, by the way?
It totally makes sense. The question I had is, what do you need then to be not only a good negotiator, but also a good closer?
Yeah. And we always talk about there's 2 things you need to negotiate well. And again, this is business-to-business sales negotiation. And the interesting thing is, if you think about the three different types of negotiation, there's conflict resolution negotiation, there's spot transactional negotiation, and there's business to business negotiation. Those are three big ones that you'll probably encounter in your life. If you try using the first two in a business to business sales negotiation, you'll often do more harm than good. However, if you learn a business to business sales negotiation, they're backwards compatible. So you can use them very good, very well in conflict resolution and also spot transactional negotiation. Did that make sense, by the way, Eric?
How does that work?
Okay. So what we always talk about, there's two things you need to negotiate well. The first is you have to put a superlative sales effort in. So there's no amount of magic or abracadabra that I'll tell you to make for a poor sales effort. A strong sales effort is absolutely critical to negotiate well. If you combine that with a strong negotiation plan, you'll capitalize on potential. If you have a weak or non-existent plan, you'll squander that potential. But there's no magic or abracadabra that you can make up on making for a poor sales effort. So strong sales effort, strong negotiation plan, success. Strong sales effort, weak negotiation, less success. Poor sales effort, there's no magic. Or if someone's trying to tell you magic or abracadabra, there's absolutely nothing to do. And the whole idea of a strong sales effort is you want to make people want to do business with you, right? How do they win when you win, right? How do you lower their business risk? How do you lower their personal risk? What's their benefit, both financial and emotional benefit? And what's the cost of delay? So Eric, if I know something's going to save you $5 million a year, just as an example, each month of delay is $400,000 and each week of delay is $100,000. So why are we going to negotiate back and forth over $50,000? It's going to take us 2 months, right? I'd rather save you $800,000 than negotiate over $50,000, right? So the whole real crux of it is you have to make people want to do business with you. And once you do that, then you're in a strong position to negotiate.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's also important to understand that you have a fair chance of the prospect. And I was just thinking when you were talking about this one name, the company was a big insurance company in Belgium. The guy was in charge of buying for incentive trips, had a game of trying to lower the commission and was changing agency every year. And I knew about it and I never enter the competition. And one day he met me at the trade show and he said, why do you never bid? Because he heard obviously about all the things the programs we were running. I said, because you don't respect your partner and just want to have a game of squeezing and it's not interesting for me to work for you.
I much respect, Eric. And, it's actually very interesting. We always talk about our third law is anticipate getting squeezed on price. And have you ever heard I could walk you through the 7 steps, but our third law is anticipating getting squeezed on price. So price negotiation is not cost justification. If you're the buyer's number one choice, they want to buy you. The next question is what price can they get you at? And they're going to be trained to squeeze you. And a lot of salespeople are not prepared to resist squeezes, right? So we always say, look forward to it, know it's coming, and in fact, be disappointed if they don't squeeze you. So Eric, if I gave you a wet towel and I gave you and I said, squeeze this wet towel, and for every drop of water, I'll give you $1,000. How many times would you squeeze that towel?
Oh, I'm going to do it as much as I can.
And when would you stop?
When I'll be tired of trying to squeeze every drop.
Okay, when you've gotten every last drop out, right? And what if I gave you a dry towel? How many times would you squeeze that towel?
That's not fair.
Okay, you wouldn't squeeze a dry towel. I'm a native New Yorker, so I always think there's something up.
Now I understand.
Yeah. So I, a native New Yorker would squeeze it once, twice, or 3 times just to see if there's anything to get out of it. But even a native New Yorker, after 3 squeezes, would give up. And the same is true of your sales negotiations. We're always surprised that salespeople go into negotiation and they get rocked back on their heels when someone gives them a price squeeze. And it's sort of look forward to it, know it's coming, and resist squeezes by refocusing back on value. So again, hey, Eric, we're going to save you $400,000 a month. We can negotiate, this $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for the next 2 or 3 months. I don't know what corporate's going to want from you or what we can give you. I don't know what we're going to ask in return, but why are we going to waste, 2 months going back and forth over 10,000 when we can get this thing, and if I can get you in the priority implementation queue, we can get this thing up and running within the week, right? We're going to start saving you $400,000 a year. Or you mentioned, hey, Eric, it's playoff time. What's your favorite team, by the way, Eric?
I live in South Florida, so, it has to be, of course.
Okay. So you get season tickets to the Heat, you'll be able to go see their playoff game or whatever. You can take your family to the Heat game as you'd like and spending nights and weekends fixing this issue, right? So you always want to sort of bring it back to personal value. So we always talk about anticipate being squeezed on price, be the dry towel. Look forward to it. know it's coming and be like, it was nothing, man. They only squeezed me 4 times, man. I was expecting 5 or 6 squeezes. Just sort of as an example.
Very good. How did you get to be a guest lecturer at Harvard? Because I mean, sales obviously is a lot of people that are involved in sales, and that you are an authority. That how did you get to be a guest lecturer there?
Yeah, oftentimes there are a lot of programs that are looking for people, and just through the industry and the business, people know us. We have I had an old track coach, and he always said, never talk about how well you've done. When you're good, other people will tell you you're good. So we always let our clients do our talking for us. And on our website, we have an example. We have a $600 million success story on our website. And what's always gratifying to me, and we have companies like DocuSign, Walgreens, Kimberly-Clark. And what's always gratifying to me, and that's the tip of the iceberg, when clients are so happy, and at these large companies, to get someone to go on video and give you a recommendation, not only do they have to want to, there's going to be a long, unpleasant trail of a lot of corporate things you need to go through for them to get to allow us to video. So we have a lot more success stories, but like when clients are willing to do all that, like we have Jim Murphy, who's a president of Western Digital. He went on camera endorsing us. We have Jeff Knapp, who had a $600 million success story. And when they're so excited about the work you do, that they're saying, yeah, we're going to go on camera, and we're going to, we're going to go on camera. We're going to go through all the legal stuff that we need to get to go on camera. It's very, on a personal level, it's very gratifying to me.
It's awesome. Congratulations. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
Now, those large companies, when you're helping them and coaching them with the sales, I've heard so many stories of the top salesperson being named director of sales, and it was a disaster. He or she was not happy in their new role. They were not a good boss. People were leaving, and it was a catastrophe. So how do you coach people at that moment when they need to find a new director of sales in those organizations?
So I always think sales management is a very different role. And the key word is management from salesperson. There's a huge difference between being a really good salesperson where you have great functional skills and managing people. And those are 2 different skill sets. And I always think about in baseball or any managerial, it's usually not the best player who is the best manager, right? It's a skill set to manage a group of people and keep them motivated and have a team of people. And, things like hiring, motivating, handling problems, removing obstacles, all kinds of things that are very different than understanding how you're going to architect a sale. So to me, it's a very different skill set. One, you have to know the business and you have to know how to sell, which is absolutely true, but you need the whole management side. So a common mistake that we see is people take their best salesperson and make them a sales manager. You can have them as a sales coach, so come to me for coaching or advice, but management is a whole different story. And then, I always think you want to have a process. So like what we do is with all our clients, we put a process in place. So, here's your negotiation. Here's your 1 page on negotiation. Here's how you execute that. Here's your 1 page on opportunity plan. Here's your 1 page on discovery. So you can take anybody who's reasonably skilled and put them into that system, and they'll be successful, right? So I always think you need a system in place, and then you can hire reasonably skilled people, and you have a much higher, again, this is just the engineer in me, and you'll have a much higher chance of success. So Eric, with your great skills, like I could probably put you in any one of our clients, and you can learn hey, what are our competitive advantages? How do we talk about that, or how do we quantify value, right? What are the trade-offs we can make? And in case of we're gonna, in case someone asks for a discount, hey, we're gonna give them, get tickets to our annual conference. That's a value of $5,000 per person. I'll throw 4 of those in, but I need a 2-year commit, right? I can tell you the trade-offs, and you can go in and do a reasonable job, probably at the 80th percentile. Once we fill in those little things, or any salesperson following the system can be reasonably successful.
Impressive. Very impressive. Ron, last part that I'd like to ask you today. So you've prepared for the sales, you've made the sales, you negotiated, you close. What are your advice for people listening, and business owners in particular, to maintain the relationship with the customer now, which is not prospect anymore, it's a customer? And also that I'm asking the question because in the previous job, I was following up. I went to see the client afterwards, and he said, "Oh, I was surprised to see you." I said, "Really? Why?" Because usually we don't see the CEO when the sales is made.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always think follow-up is really important. And I always like, what we always do is we don't consider a successful sale to have or quantified success stories well in excess of the price we charge. So for all of our clients, now some clients, they can't quantify it, but at least we try and get an anecdote that would say, oh, and in our business, typically one sale will more than pay for what we charge, if it's a large customer. So we always try and go back and have a quantifiable, agreed upon cost justification. So we always say, is it working? What's the number of people who are using it? So we trained 100 people, 60% of them are using it. Okay, how do we get the other 40% to use it? Of those 60, what's the success story that we've had? Mm-hmm. Okay, of the new people you have in, we have to do, and this gives you opportunity for, add-ins and upside training. Oh, so you had 20% turnover, so it's 20 new people, we have to train those folks. So to me, it's always critical. And our philosophy is, I want to go back and sort of have quantifiable success story well in excess of what you paid us. So we have lifelong relationships. And we had one client who said, look, you brought us quantified, $8 million worth of success stories. Even only half of those is true. That's $4 million. That's well in excess of what we paid you, just sort of example. So always follow up. And again, what I always sort of talk about, I always want to drive down to, we want to make sure you receive positive ROI, and we'll keep working through till we find something that demonstrates positive ROI.
Brilliant. Love it. So my last question now, when we meet in 1 year with a bottle of champagne, what are we going to celebrate?
First of all, why are we going to wait that long? So I always look at it, I look at life in two ways. I look at it on a personal level and a business level. So I always look at it like being here around another year and doing good things with good people. So that's always worth a celebration. And I always look at our client success from a business point of view. We want to be successful, but I always think we're successful when our client's successful. So I always measure our success in terms of our client successes. So if we keep making our clients successful, then I'll measure it as a good year. Wonderful.
How do people get in touch with you, Ron?
You can reach me anywhere, LinkedIn, Ron Hubsher. Our website is www.salesog, as an original gangster. So it's sales and OG. And I was like, wow, that gives me a new image of myself. I've transcended my form. And you can call me 650-520-9849. That's my cell, 650-520-9849. I actually pick up. It very rarely rings, and it's mostly spam. But I'm just an old school guy who picks up. You can go to LinkedIn, and love helping people. You can download a copy of our book, Closing Time. You get a complimentary copy if you go to our website, Sales OG. And we always love helping people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience with me today.
Eric, thank you. I'm really delighted to be on your podcast. So I'm grateful.
Ron, thank you so much for sharing your insight with me today. Everybody listening will for sure be a better salesperson thanks to you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please do so on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.